Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I'm still messing around with various glues trying to figure out what is best for the table saw fence. So I thought in the interim I would put together a spindle sander. It is kind of like an entry-level sanding project. I do have some ideas for some more elaborate ones. And I thought what I'd do is put together a simple one that's going to fit on the mill. Now, there's a couple of ways I can go about this, of course. The one on the right, the mallet, I can take a bunch of pieces and I can glue them all together and work on it that way. Or like the one on the left, this is a solid chunk of oak, and I could turn that down on the lathe and do it that way. But I was thinking that, well, my chuck, the Jacob's chuck on the mill is a 1/2 inch, and that is a bit thin when you're talking about using wood it's going to have a fair amount of torque on it. So I thought instead what I'd do is I would use an aluminum core and then run that through there. So this is an arbor I put together quite a while ago for rounding out pieces of acrylic for some of the projects I had. And I thought at first what I would do is use that. It is machined and set up so I can squeeze any number of pieces in there and then round them out. I decided not to go that route because, well, it's going to be put onto, well, a solid core of aluminum. And if it's not quite true between the two, when I put them together, it's going to have a bit of wobble to it. So I decided to do instead is use some solid aluminum I have, a couple pieces coming up here now, and decide which ones of these would be the best for making, well, the center part of this. This is 3/8, I think, and it is necessary to always take that down a little bit, but it is kind of thin. I don't mind it being thin right where it goes to the chuck, but I don't really want to have it too thin for the part that's hanging on to where the wood's going to be. So I thought I would go with a 1 inch, which is the last piece I had there, and of course I have this here, which is 1.5 inches. If I go with 1.5 inches, I have to turn it down an awful lot, and of course it's a huge waste of material. So I decided I will go with the 1 inch. I did try a little bit with the much thicker version, but it was just going to take, well, it was going to take too long for starters, and then secondly, it was just going to be, like I said, a lot of aluminum waste, and I really didn't want to do that. So what I did down here is I took the 1 inch solid rod, and I just turned it a little bit down, not much, just enough to take the oxidation off the outside and to true it up, because, well, this is extruded aluminum, so it is not true from one to the other. It's pretty good, but I wanted to keep this as even as possible. So I put in the lathe and I just took that extra off, and now what I'm going to do is I need a 1/2 inch shank on one end, so I am going to turn that down by just turn it down by taking a very large amount off at each pass. As you're going to see here, it is probably stretching my mill just my lathe a little bit to take this much off at once, but it does take some amount of time to machine this down, and it doesn't have to be pretty initially. I just need to get as much material off as possible. So it took about 3, 4, or 5 minutes doing it this way. Probably would have taken triple that if I had done what's recommended as far as the amount to take off. So I'm just, like I said, just getting it off. That's all that really mattered. And once I get it down to 1/2 inch, plus a little bit, I wanted to leave a little extra on because I want to sand this down when I get to the point where I want it to be. So I switched over to, as you can see here, a different bit. And this is just going to smooth it out quite a bit because there's a lot of rough edges there. When you're taking off that much at once, what can happen with aluminum is it just almost welds itself to the tool, and I just want to remove that now and smooth that out as much as possible. And this is a much finer high-speed steel bit, so it will take this down to smooth quite quickly. And then once I get close, you're going to notice that it is not going to go all the way down to 1/2 inch because there is a little bit of free play for the Jacob's chuck, and all I want to do is get it well, so that it would fit and fit nicely when I snug it down. So it is going to be slightly larger than a 1/2 inch. And then once I get it close, I am going to take some sandpaper, and I'm going to take all that roughness out and polish it. I'm going to start off with, I think it was 400, and then I'm going to go to 600, and I get it relatively nice. It doesn't need to be this. Again, this is a tool. I don't have to make it look pretty, but there's no reason not to make it look a little bit nicer, at least initially anyway, until it's been in the chuck a few times, and then of course it's going to get banged up, and that's fine. It is, like I said, it's designed to sand things down. So this is going to be my core, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a number of 3/4 inch ply, hardwood ply, and I'm going to just cut squares, and then those squares are going to get glued together and glued to this shaft, and then that needs to cure for a little while. I want to make sure it's good and solid. And then this part here that I'm finishing up right now, this is going to be the part that's going to go into the lathe. So what I'm going to do is when it's in the Jacob's chuck in the mill, this is the part that's going to be what it's going to spin on. So I want to make sure that when this is turned down properly, that we have a nice true spin. I don't want it to be wobbling back and forth, and the only way to do that, of course, is to make sure that when I turn this down, I turn it in place. So cut a bunch of 3/4 ply, and I'm going to just drill a 1-inch hole down the middle of these. I turned that down to 1 inch. Well, it wasn't 1 inch. It's going to be ever so slightly less than 1 inch, but that should just give enough room for the glue, so that should work quite well. So I was going to drill a quick hole, and then I'm going to stack them together. I had also originally intended to get the gluing done for this in this video, but I was thinking as I was going through here, do I need a keyway? And I wasn't entirely sure, and I didn't want to rush this and go ahead without putting one in if I decide I want one. So that's going to be in the next video, which will probably be before next weekend. This is not a hard project to do. I just didn't have enough time to get it all done today. So we'll get that done. Definitely leave comments if you think a keyway is necessary. And of course, the next part is once all that glue is fully cured and everything, I'm going to take this big block of blocks and I'm going to put it into the lathe and turn them down to round. Now, one of the other things I'll do probably prior to the actual gluing process is just to knock off the corners so I don't have too much work to do on the lathe to get this to be true. So thank you very much for watching. Leave comments, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video, and bye for now.